China is now a Basel Committee member together with the United States, and that is a body which creates best international standards and regulatory framework for financial sector. And 4 Asian countries are now members of G20, which aspires to be a global standard setter for many policy initiatives. And that's a clear result of these developments, I think. Okay, so what's next? I think that there are many challenges which lie ahead. We are looking into a period of much lower potential output, and that is a very robust evidence, empirical evidence, that banking crises do lead to durable output losses. There is a need to tackle financial sector reform, and in the advanced countries, as I said, the recovery came at a considerable cost of fiscal deterioration, which need to be dealt with. Now, this is an evidence of the past banking crisis, which shows fairly vividly that it is quite likely that we will see a large permanent output loss relative to previous trends. Impaired financial systems take time to heal, and as I said, there is quite high cyclical unemployment, which could lead to high structural unemployment in many of the advanced countries. There has been a very significant increase in fiscal deficits and debts in most advanced countries, and the average fiscal deficit for G20 is projected to be over 8% till the end of 2010. And all of that needs, of course, to be tackled, and that's a major vulnerability of this very fragile recovery going forward. Because, as I said, the growth needs to be imbalanced to Asia, because there's not going to be any demand, neither from the US households or more generally from this part of the world, which has this fiscal consolidation in front of it. A final word. Now, part of that crisis was also caused, of course, by widely discussed problems in financial regulation and supervision, which needs to be dealt with, not in order to prevent a future crisis. Regulation is not capable of achieving that, but hopefully to be better prepared to deal with it once and it comes, and wherever it comes. That's all.
Thank you very much indeed, Michaela. So a couple of sort of striking things. Broadly, coordinated response has been successful. Partly as a result of that, we're back to business as usual. So you're very much on the side of James Robinson this morning, I think. Let's pick that up in the discussion. It's now a pleasure to introduce Muna Cherkaoui. She is a Moroccan national and professor at the Mohammed V University, the Faculty of Law, Economics and Social Science in Rabat. She's the national coordinator of the Network of Economic Research. She's worked in several universities around the world and written a lot on international economic policies, but also on poverty and gender. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by thanking GGM for the kind invitation to participate to this important conference. And I'm going to center my analysis on Arab countries, and I'm going to try to look at the impact of the crisis on the Arab countries and at the regional response to this crisis. I will organize my thought in the following way. I will start by looking at the impact of the crisis on Arab oil exporters. Then I will look at the impact of the crisis on Arab oil importers. I will look at the country-specific responses to the crisis, but also at an attempt to have a coordinated regional response. And then I will try to draw some lessons from this. Basically, the global financial and economic crisis, as has been said before, has affected most regions of the world, and the Arab countries are no exceptions. The Arab countries may have appeared at first less affected than other regions. However, as the crisis unfolds and affects the real economy, some Arab countries are facing slower growth, higher unemployment, and increases in poverty. As was said about Africa, the Arab countries entered the crisis after decades of structural reform, which had led to positive growth for most of them starting in the year 2000. There are different ways of classifying the Arab countries, as most of you know, but for the sake of simplicity and given the time frame of this presentation, we will distinguish only the oil exporting and the oil importing Arab countries. The distinction results from the fact that the two subgroups have been affected through different channels, but also at different levels, and that the full impact occurred at different points in time. The responses to the crisis have been country-specific, very diverse in timing, forms, scope, and depth. Let's start by the oil exporters. The main channels through which the crisis affected the oil exporters are the reduction in the global economic growth and, most evidently, the decline in the price of oil, change in stock market indices, and an increased vulnerability of the banking sector and of the real estate sector. And one of the characteristics of the Arab oil exporting countries is that they were affected very early on by the crisis. If we look here at the impact of the crisis on real GDP growth for the oil exporters, then we can see that this GDP growth has declined significantly for a lot of countries, even though it stays positive for most of them, except for Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. The crisis has affected real GDP growth, but it has also impacted in an important way the stock markets in these different countries, especially in the GCC countries. And you can see here that there was a very sharp drop in the stock market indices in the Arab GCC countries and throughout March 2009, and that the stock market picked up after that and sometimes gained even more than what they had lost. Here, this evolution of the stock market indices is strongly linked to the price of oil. Regarding the banking sector, the characteristic of the banking sector in the oil exporting countries could make them very vulnerable. They have seen very rapid loan growth in recent years. They have a large exposure to the real estate sector, and they have relatively high exposure to structured products. This exposure of GCC banks could raise the need for GCC governments to extend their support to the banking sector, but fortunately the Arab oil exporters have the means to support their banking sector if needs be. The Arab oil exporters have been affected from the economic side, but also on the social front. There has been high increase in unemployment for both nationals and foreigners. In Kuwait, there has been a cancellation of 17,000 work permits in the first half of 2009, and we've seen also outflows of workers from Dubai. But this increase in unemployment has not only affected migrant workers, it has affected also nationals. Let's turn now to the impacts of the crisis on the oil importers. The channels through which the crisis affected the oil importers is of course different from the ones that have played a role in the impact on the oil exporters. And the main channels here are economic activities in general, of course, but especially trade, foreign direct investment, tourism, and remittances. The limited integration of these countries to international capital markets led to a delay in the impact of the crisis, and their banking sector also were not too much affected because they were not exposed to toxic products.